Well, we're through to the semi-finals. We faced the Netherlands in Dortmund on Wednesday night. Glenn, we've got a few players returning from injury, suspension as well. Do you think Southgate's going to stick with that three at the back? Do you think he'll revert to the back four?
I think he'll bring Mark Gurley back in for Konza. Other than that, I can see it being exactly the same. I don't think Luke Shaw will start. He'll be used as the in the second half to change things up. So I can see him going with exactly the same team. I mean, the only other change you'd look at is, Phil Foden hasn't fired again. Do you bring someone like Cole Palmer in for him? But I just don't think he will. I think the way Gareth Southgate will look at it is that we've got through these games basically with this team. We got through against Switzerland. So why do I need to change more than I have to? So I think he'll go with more or less the same as what he went for, and there's no reason why that formation won't work against the Dutch. They've been a bit similar to us really in that they've won more convincingly some of their games, but they've been a little bit hit and miss. And I saw an interview with one of their players today where he basically admitted that. That they don't feel like they've been sort of firing on all cylinders either. But apart from Spain, it seems to be the way for virtually every team that's out there or has been out there. So yeah, hope if either of these teams actually turns up and the other one doesn't, it could be a 3 or 4-0 game. But no, I'm expecting it to be another close one. But I don't think Southgate would change too much.
We didn't see any changes or as many changes as we thought for the last game, Steve. So I guess Glenn's hit the nail on the head there. We're unlikely to see Luke Shaw coming in or Ivan Toney starting instead of Harry Kane. It's probably going to be pretty much the same team, just that one switch at the back.
Yeah, I think ultimately while Southgate will publicly come out and say he's reasonably satisfied with, he's obviously satisfied with results, possibly some question marks over certain aspects of performances. The problem is that ultimately most of his best players are absolutely knackered. So you're at best getting 60 to 70% out of those players, and it's about maximising the period of time with those players on the field. And ultimately that means they're all going to start. And as and when they look dead on their feet, that'll be the moment at which we change it, but probably not a moment sooner. I think ultimately Harry Kane has scored 65 goals for England. Ivan Toney has scored 1. Yep. So I don't think there's any realistic prospect, unless Kane pulls up lame after training today. I don't think there's any chance that Toney starts in place of Kane. I don't think there's any chance that Palmer starts in place of Bellingham, for example. So yeah, I think ultimately people will moan about it, and everyone's entitled to their views. But ultimately, Southgate will live or die on his selections, and he's obviously still confident that those players will deliver when it matters the most, because they're the guys that have got the experience of doing it before. Bellingham's just won the Champions League. Kane obviously hasn't won anything other than lots of personal accolades, but that he's good for goals. Yeah. And things like that. And defensively, we're generally quite sound.
Would you bring Luke Shaw in or not? Would you risk him? I know he's not played. Is it 5 months since he last played a full game?
February, I think, was the last time he played. And he played 40 minutes on Saturday.
You said he did make the difference when he came on, didn't he? But
he did. I do wonder whether
again.
Yeah, whether there's a question, maybe you start him and give him an hour, because there's a couple of options that you could use to replace him, or maybe you start with the conservative approach of Trippier, who's kind of been. He was better on Saturday certainly than in previous games. So maybe you start with Trippier, and maybe you do the sort of slightly more adventurous change with. A little bit earlier than on Saturday. So rather than with 15 to go, you do it on the hour. So Shaw's building it up. He gets either half an hour or an hour if we go to extra time again. Let's not forget all of these players have played the extra half an hour twice now. So we've got an extra hour in our legs compared to the Dutch, who have gone through in 90 minutes both games. So I do wonder whether that might end up being a bit of a differential as well.
Yeah. If you look at the Dutch team, they've got Denzel Dumfries at right back, who gets forward a lot. They've been playing Bergwijn on the right, who's not really done much, but they've got this sub who comes on in the second half, Daniel Marlin, who's been really, really good, really direct, scored a couple of goals. So, maybe your choice as to who plays that left-hand side, maybe you've got to factor in, who the Dutch are going to start. Obviously, you don't know who the Dutch are going to start, but looking at previous games, maybe that comes into it a bit. I mean, what undoubtedly helped Luke Shaw when he came on was the fact that when Trippier was on, he didn't really have anyone in front of him on the left-hand side. Foden's kind of over there, but not really, because he wants to play inside. When Shaw came on, you had Eze out there, you had Cole Palmer out there as well. So there was sort of, the team was better balanced, partly as a result of Shaw coming on.
You could double up on their wing backs then, couldn't you?
Yeah, it was certainly more favourable for Shaw than it was for Trippier with the makeup of the rest of the team. So I just don't think with Southgate being the sort of pragmatic manager that he undoubtedly is, I think he would see starting Luke Shaw probably as too much of a risk in a Euro semi-final when he can bring him on the hour mark or whatever, and have a better idea of how things are going by then.
I don't think he'd get too much criticism if that was the case. Steve, what have you made of the Netherlands? Obviously, Cody Gakpo is doing all right and scoring a few goals. And you kind of think that Ronald Koeman might have a bit of a point to prove if he can get through to the final and play Spain. That's the ultimate, I think, for him, isn't it? He'd be relishing that.
Yeah, I mean, I heard an interview that a Dutch journalist did on Radio Solent with Jono.
Yesterday, yeah.
Either yesterday, I think it was. And yeah, he basically said exactly that Koeman really wants to get through and play Spain, because he obviously feels that he was completely shafted at Barcelona, completely stitched up with not being told the true financial situation. And obviously he came in mid-COVID when games were being played behind closed doors and everything was all just really weird. And he got a bit stiffed on that job. But he seems to have done a reasonable job with the Dutch national team so far. But I think whether their system works will come down to, much like us, it comes down to individuals. It's been interesting actually seeing that the Dutch opinion on Virgil van Dijk.
Are they not fans? I haven't.
No, they're not. Certainly not at this tournament. Their view is that so obviously it's De Vrij and Van Dijk alongside each other. They reckon that the Spurs lad Mickey van der Ven should be in there instead, because Van Dijk's not been quite up to it, and he's in that sort of moment at the moment where he's kind of constantly barracking his teammates and doing a lot of pointing and a lot of gesticulating without actually taking care of his own game. So I do wonder whether, that's possibly something that we can exploit if his mind's a little bit all over the place. But no, Koeman's done a decent job to get them where they are. Although, obviously had the fallback of finishing third in the group, which in the World Cup just gone, they wouldn't have got through that. So it's one of those. But then Portugal have won it from third place, so it's not a complete sort of foregone conclusion. If you finish third in your group, you got no chance, because they managed to do it. But yeah, Portugal.
That was sad, wasn't it? Portugal going out. It's real sad.
Oh yeah, devastated. I was disappointed by the lack of Ronaldo tears. It was. But I think basically that was because he'd kept up his side of the bargain. He'd scored his penalty, and therefore he didn't really give a toss about the rest of the team. Whereas the previous round, obviously he missed the penalty, and therefore he'd failed in the bit that he could kind of control.
The game.
He's an absolute lunatic, that guy. But I imagine that'll be him done at tournaments. Although saying that, Pepe's still going very strong at 41. He was very impressive, I thought.
Yeah.
Have you made been up to date with the stuff about the referee as well, Glenn, that they picked for the weekend and the previous that he's had with Bellingham?
Yeah.
I kind of feel like we need to tread a little bit carefully, but that seems like something which was wholly avoidable by UEFA, and everybody has kind of like said, well, you know, they're picked in advance, and it's going to be a talking point. Certainly, if something happens and the decision goes against Bellingham, for example, it's going to be something we'll be chatting about again.
Well, though he was very young at the time, it was a particularly stupid thing for Bellingham to have said, to brought up. I mean, but
Cost him a fortune.
basically, the referee, that referee, was banned for match fixing. You know, there's no getting away from that.
It was
happened.
20 years ago, wasn't it? Was it 20 years ago?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it was a long time ago. He was banned for 6 months. But that 6-month period was basically it was never reported, never publicized that this referee was banned for his part in it, because basically that 6-month period was also an evidence gathering thing where he was kind of effectively undercover gathering evidence against Heuser, I think was the main referee who got banned for life as a result of this. So he kind of got almost a plea bargain for cooperation, because I think this guy's Vaya, he got paid €300 for his part in a game that was supposedly fixed. I mean, they couldn't pinpoint any. Well, they couldn't pinpoint any decisions in that game where he'd made a decision that was so obviously sort of against what should have been given. So they couldn't really prove one way or the other, but they obviously knew that he'd been paid. So that was basically what he was convicted on the strength of. But I mean, there's certainly an argument that if you're convicted of anything along those lines, it should be an automatic life ban. So there's a question of whether the guy should be refereeing at all when, if you were kind of happy to take the money in the past, then who's to say that you wouldn't be more tempted by something a little bit higher profile in future?
Well, I assume he's got this game on merit, has he? They were the his performance throughout the competition.
His performances through the tournament have been fine from what I can see. Don't think there's been any controversy in any of the games that he's taken charge of, and I think he did the Conference League final as well. So he's well regarded within both DFB and UEFA. So in terms of getting the game on merit, absolutely no problem. But it's a case of I think the question is whether A, he should be refereeing at all, and B, whether kind of the history, you might kind of say, well, maybe we put him on the other semi-final, perhaps.
Would have been an easier option, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but then I mean, I imagine whoever does the appointments at UEFA probably completely forgotten all about the past incident. Certainly probably had no recollection of Bellingham bringing it up in an interview after a Bundesliga game. So yeah,
as you say, Glenn, he was quite young at the time, wasn't he? And although he shouldn't have said it, he got in trouble for his comments. He kind of put it down to his age a little bit and just being a bit.
Well, it's a bit like when you leave a job and you slag off your employer, isn't it? You know, you don't know that in 5 years' time you might want to go back and work there. So it's always best just to shut up and not and just take whatever's come your way and get on with it.
It was in the heat of the moment. It was one of those immediate sort of literally pitch side interviews that they do in the Bundesliga,
under their nose,
where literally as he's walking off the pitch, doesn't even have time to go into the dressing room and come back out into the tunnel for the interview. And they've just lost by a single goal in the derby to Bayern, and they weren't given what most people probably agree was a pretty blatant penalty for handball. This was pre-VAR, I think, and he obviously came out with what he said, saying, "Well, what do you expect when this guy's been done for match fixing? Why are you giving him the biggest games in the country? You're always going to have these sort of stupid decisions," which obviously you can't get away with saying that sort of thing because you're clearly implying that he's on the take. But you can understand why players would have that view. I think ultimately the referee's passed.
It's saying the quiet thing out loud, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's saying.
Do you remember
yeah, it's
Charlie
saying-
Austin doing that little rant? Was it Charlie Austin after the
Yeah.
game? It's a joke, mate. It's a joke, and that became a gif, wasn't it, for years in the Park Life remake? And it just obviously cost Jude Bellingham a bit more money.
Yeah,
Which is a shame.
€40,000.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Let's just chat about who we think might make it through to the final then. The other game kicking off in around 12 minutes from now. Steve, your shout for the final. Who are you thinking?
Oh, it's going to be the populist choice. It's going to be England-France. And everyone is going to be furious about it. And then we'll put on a show, and it'll be 3-3 in the final. It'll be the most open game in the world, and everybody just post-match Southgate and Deschamps kind of pull their heads off as if they've got a mask, and it's it's Bielsa and Guardiola underneath the masks who have actually been masterminding all of this.
If you're watching along live, put your predictions for the final in. Glenn, who do you think?
I think France will get through against Spain. I think they'll bore the living hell out of it, and it'll be extra time and penalties. I think it'll be a long night tonight. England, I don't know. I've grown wary of predicting England games. If it comes down to individual quality, then we'll go through. And that can either be someone doing something individually brilliant, or it going all the way to penalties again. If it comes down to that, we'll go through. But that's all I'm going to say about it. So yeah, I'll go for an England-France final as well. And where I disagree with Steve is that I think that game would probably be absolutely dreadful as well.